So today, we're talking all about starting a new year and trying to make it our healthiest year yet. And I don't know about you, but I have definitely made New Year's resolutions or set goals for the year, and then I find at the end of that year, that goal might not have actually been met. Has that ever happened to anyone in this room? Right, this week it already happened, right? Now, and you may wonder, as a chiropractor, why am I talking about this subject in particular? And in my career, especially in the beginning, I used to find it really difficult when I would see patients and I'd be like, oh, like if you did this and you did this, then like your whole life will just be sunshine and rainbows. And obviously I notice a trend that not all the time is my advice followed, which is completely normal, and it happens all the time. And I would get this little frustration, like wishing that I could just control the behaviors of the people around me, because if I could, then I could just imagine how beautiful their life would be, right? Like, oh, I could just picture it for them. And it took me a while to understand and to step back from that and try to learn, well, why aren't changes being met? Why do people struggle so hard to make changes, in particular when it comes to things about their health? And I dived into this information and I was like, oh, like this is going to be so helpful for me, especially in helping patients take back control of their health, because if you understand what drives us and what feeds our behaviors, it can be really empowering then for us moving forward to meet those goals that we have for ourselves. When we don't understand exactly what drives our behaviors, then it makes certain changes really, really difficult. So my hope today is that you'll learn one or two little tidbits that maybe you didn't know before that'll help you moving forward in setting whatever goals you have for this new year, okay? Now, when people, what's a common goal or New Year's resolution that people may have for themselves? Any ideas? Eating habits, losing weight. That's a big one. Anything else? Exercise more. Anything else? Drink less. Good. What do all of these things have in common? They're impossible. You just can't do it. Why? Why even bother, right? Well, the thing is, they're all behaviors, right? When we make goals or we make changes, we always tend to start with the behaviors, right? I want to eat less so that I lose weight. I want to exercise more. Whatever actions I can to attain whatever that goal is. So the reason that this doesn't work is because we are never going to behave in ways that contradict what we feel to be true about ourselves. So I'm going to break this down for you a little bit. If our goal is to lose weight, all right, say someone is really, that's their huge desire, is to lose 10, 15, 20 pounds. What do you think that person feels about themselves? What are the thoughts that they tell themselves on a regular basis?
They're too heavy.
I'm too heavy, I'm fat. What else? I can't control my eating. Yep. Maybe I'm unhealthy. I have no willpower. I just love sugar or food. I love cake. I can never live without cake, right? So these are all these thoughts that you have, okay? Now, if you're someone who believes like, okay, I'm fat, I'm unhealthy, I have no willpower, how are you going to feel? What kind of feelings does that? You're not going to feel very good. Maybe a little stressed. What else are you going to feel? Depressed. Yep. Maybe like anxious. Anything else? Afraid to make changes, right? So if you're feeling stressed, depressed, afraid, what behaviors are you going to tend to lean toward? How is that individual going to behave? They're going to eat more. Interesting, right? And they're probably going to be maybe lazy or more slothful, have less motivation to get off the couch. So most of the time we start with those behaviors, right? That laziness, that's okay, like let's just move more. Let's just eat more, right? But if we aren't addressing the thought that I'm unhealthy, I'm fat, I'm overweight, right? Those behaviors become really, really difficult to maintain in the long run because you're behaving in a way that contradicts what you think to be true about yourself. If you think, well, I'm just not healthy, and then here you are trying to exercise, trying to eat better, it's not going to last very long before your opinion about yourself wins out. Does that make sense? So when we're talking about, especially when it talks about goal setting and lifestyle changes, really trying to address, well, what do we believe to be true about ourselves first and foremost? And trying to get to that root cause and fixing that first. Because if you believe that you're unhealthy or you believe that you're fat, then we have to understand, well, where do those feelings stem from? And trying to address that first before we then make those changes, right? Because if you're someone that feels like, oh, I'm strong, I'm resilient, I'm capable, that the way that that person is going to behave is completely different than someone who feels I'm unworthy, I'm just meant to be unhealthy, my body's always going to fail me, right? This is going to be really difficult to build up the energy to overcome those thoughts, okay? What is the number one human addiction? Anyone have any idea? Oh, that's a good answer. Yes, that is true, but I'm going a little differently in this route. Any other thoughts? Our number one human addiction is the idea of ourselves. We are addicted to being ourselves. And it's interesting because they've done research that 95% of who we are by the age of 35 is a set of unconscious patterns, behaviors, and automatic programming based on past history. So say, for example, you were in a really bad car accident and you got rear-ended. Now, every time someone cuts you off in traffic, you automatically get really, really, really tense and really stressed. That reaction has no basis for what's actually happening in that present moment. Your body is responding from its past hurt and past trauma. And that's how we behave a large majority of our day, right? Say someone says something to you and you think that, maybe they're just like, oh, did you put the file away properly? I don't know. And maybe they just asked you, did you put the file away? But in your head, you're being triggered of, oh, I didn't do my job right. And so you're coming at that immediate reaction with some sort of visceral response, not because that's actually what's happening, but because somewhere when you were a child or in a past relationship, you were told that you weren't doing something right. And now you're responding from that past place of hurt. So if you think about it, if 95% of our reactions or our reality is based on past hurt and is unconscious, that means only 5% of us is aware that this is happening. So then we're going to try to make change, and we're trying to take this 5% that's aware to try to change the 95% that's subconscious patterning. So really, that's like climbing uphill Mount Everest, right? It's really, really hard to break through that 95% of unconscious patterning unless we try to dive deeper into that 95% in trying to have an understanding of, oh, where does this arise from? And then if we have that basis of information, then we can start to make those changes moving forward, okay? So that's the thing that we're the most addicted to is ourselves. And this is really hard because that 5%, that awareness is like, oh, well, I want to have a better life, right? I want a better job. I want to be in a better relationship. But if you're someone who inherently believes, say, that you're unlovable, what kind of relationship are you going to attract to you? Not a very nice relationship. A relationship that confirms that you're unlovable, right? You're going to maybe have a partner that doesn't make you feel loved. Why? Because it's reaffirming what you believe to be true about yourself already. So this is so if you then have that 5% awareness, like, okay, let me leave this relationship. Well, what's the next relationship going to look like? And we've probably, like even talking about this, we've probably experienced this with loved ones or people that we know, where you see these patterns unfolding over and over again, and you're like, oh, why can't they see it, right? And it's really easy to see it in other people, and it's sometimes harder to find it in ourselves. But if that person can then understand, well, where does this feeling of unlovable come from, and how do I address that, that's going to affect then the future outcomes of those relationships. Because you're always going to bring you to every relationship. So if you, especially like when it comes to healthy relationships, if you want to have a healthy relationship, you need to have a healthy you, because you're going to bring it into every relationship. Does that make sense? Now, you're like, oh, I didn't know we were getting so deep today, Dr. Amanda. This is exciting. So this is that little thing that I talked about, when the thoughts create our feelings create our behaviors, and then our behaviors are going to reinforce our thoughts. So if we're trying to change any aspect of our life, just sticking to these behaviors, if they're not confirming what we believe to be true, over time this is going to fail. Okay? Now, another thing that really can affect our ability to set goals is a lot of times we come from a place of scarcity or lack in the present moment. There's something now that I am unhappy with. So say it's the example of I want to lose weight. In this present moment, I am resistant to my body weight. So say you want to lose 20 pounds, but in this moment, I completely am feeling angst and unhappiness towards my current self and my current weight. So you're creating suffering in your own present moment, in this present moment, about something that you're not going to change. If you're, say, 190 pounds right now, that's not going to change. So why should I be fighting something that is true in this moment? And that's why if we're coming from a place of lack or self-hate or feeling unworthy or like we're not enough in this present moment, we create more of that in the future tense. Versus if we're coming from a place of abundance, like, okay, I am strong, I am resilient, I am capable, I am worthy of health, I have health within me. Even if in this moment you know that you could lose weight, you're not resistant to the fact that I'm 199 pounds and my goal is to be 170, whatever it is. But in this moment, I know I'm 199 and I'm not gonna be resistant to that fact and that truth. Because when we come from a place of lack, it creates more lack. When we come from an energy of abundance, it creates more abundance. And we have a tendency to think that everything I need is outside of myself, right? So those thoughts, well, I'll feel worthy, I'll feel good enough when I get that promotion, or when I lose the 20 pounds. When I'm 170, then I'll be happy, right? But when we're dependent on everything outside of ourselves to make ourselves feel good enough, that's really volatile foundation. Versus understanding that you have everything you need right here. I don't need anything else but me. And I think that's the part that gets a little difficult to comprehend, is that we all have this ability to be completely abundant without any, extra stuff. Money, wealth, muscle, weight loss. Everyone inherently has everything they need within them to be completely happy without all this other clutter. You don't need the best supplement. You don't need that facelift. You don't need, but we've been convinced we live in a world that's constantly bombarding us with, oh, you need to do this XYZ thing. You need to do this, take this magical supplement or this skin cream that'll make you look 20 years younger, right? So everything's trying to tell us that in some way we're not good enough, when in reality, that's just completely not true. One of my favorite stories is the story of the Golden Buddha, and I think about it a lot when it comes to this topic, which there's this myth that there was a group of Tibetan monks, and they had this beautiful Golden Buddha statue that was in their village. and they got word that there was a bunch of outsiding fighting tribes that were going to come and attack their village. So they wanted to protect the golden Buddha, so what did they do? They covered it with a bunch of mud and grime and dirt and covered the Buddha so it just looked like a gross clay statue. And then the warring tribe came in and wiped out this village and these monks. Years and years later, there were researchers at the village and the archaeologist, he looked at this statue, they were going to move it, and he noticed there was a little fleck of gold that was coming out from underneath all this dirt and grime. So then he cleaned the golden Buddha, wiped away all the dirt, and uncovered this beautiful statue. And it's this analogy of what we all have within ourselves, this inherent light and this abundance, this absolute truth that we're all good enough and perfectly made, and that what happens is we have traumas or hurts or people telling us we're not good enough, these little things that cut away at us over time, and it build up this grime around that beautiful golden Buddha. And we learn to forget what we all have inside of us, and then we become so inherent and like, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm fat, I'm unworthy, and we forget that no, at our core, all of us have this inherent light that is just waiting to be unleashed. And I believe that the purpose of life is for the divine to become aware of itself, right? It depends on your religious beliefs and things like that, but that's what heaven on earth is, right? Is finding that ability to be inherently content with the fact that everything that you have in this moment is exactly what you need to be free and happy. And when you're like, oh, well then why would I need to set goals? Well, it doesn't mean that you can't grow and learn and expand, because it's all a practice. Because what happens is we're talking about this, you're like, oh yeah, okay, I can become aware of those thoughts. And then someone cuts you off in traffic, or your husband doesn't wash the dishes, or your dog pees in the house, right? Something happens and it triggers you and it takes you back, and you forget in that moment, and that awareness kind of evaporates. And those situations in life are actually gifts. The places, the people, the situations that trigger us the most are showing us where in our life we have resistance to what is, or we have an inability to be free. So those triggers are actually gifts, and sometimes in the moment, they don't feel like gifts, and then a day later, you're like, oh, I could have probably been a little more aware in that situation. My husband not doing the dishes was not him telling me he doesn't love me or appreciate me. It was just him not doing the dishes, right? But we like to put our own spin on things. Does that make sense? Any questions? No? A lot of information so far. Now, some of the big tools that we can use now, if you're starting to make goals, if you're getting deeper and understanding your thoughts that drive your behaviors, is what are some ways that then you can transition to make some healthier habits. Habit stacking is one of my favorite things to do, which is if you have something that you want to change, if you're trying to drink more water, if you're trying to walk more, you add them to a habit that you're already doing. So say you want to drink more water, then you tie it into, okay, well right when I brush my teeth, I'm going to have a glass of water there, and I'm going to drink that before I brush my teeth. So there's something that you know that you're going to do no matter what, because it's a habit, and then you tie something new to that habit. And trying to make it really, really easy. People who like to watch TV, I've seen this, well, get a stationary bike or get a treadmill and walk in front of the TV, so you're getting your exercise while you're also doing a habit that you already perform regularly. I like the brushing the teeth just because most of us, I hope, are doing that twice a day. So it's really easy to add something to it, whether it's movement exercise, if you want to squat more, if you want to work on your balance, just doing a little one-legged balance, which is really, really important for our overall health. You can stack that in really easily. Meditation, I've done a whole class here on meditation. That's the best way for us to get into that unconscious mind, or that 95% that believes who we already are to be true, is getting into that meditative state, or trying to really sit with our thoughts. A lot of times, say you have those thoughts like, I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable. Those thoughts are hard to sit with, which is why people get addictions to food or alcohol or TV, because all of these kind of mindless behaviors, they prevent us from sitting with those thoughts and trying to understand those a little bit deeper. So meditation can be a really, really great tool, especially if you're trying to make changes. Mirror neurons, these are one of my favorite neurons in the body, but basically they are the neurons in our brain that are activated when we see other people performing a behavior. So this is basically who you surround yourself with, you will become. So if you surround yourself with negative, toxic people who are already always saying things like, I'm fat, I'm not worthy, or self-deprecating type of talk, that's going to affect you in the long run. Your brain is literally going to start being wired to do the same behaviors. Because not only do those neurons fire when I see someone perform that behavior, they then are refired when I perform the behavior. So it can work both positively and negatively. So surrounding yourselves by people that are already doing the things that say your goal is to lose weight, find someone who's already lost weight, or who's going to the gym every day, or who exercises regularly, and become friends. And use that person as a tool to help you reach those goals. That's a phenomenal trick. And then also, you'll notice, especially when it comes to goals like losing weight, there can be people in your tribe that get very uncomfortable if you start to succeed. And they'll be the ones that, oh, why can't you have cake, right? Why are you not drinking coffee? Or why aren't you drinking alcohol? And it can be really uncomfortable to be around people who are making such phenomenal changes to themselves, and those people having love and awareness from where they're coming from, and then probably separating yourself, especially if you have big goals, because they're going to be the ones that are going to revert you to your old patterns pretty easily if you let them. Okay, we all know these people, right? Yeah. Now, journaling. This is a great tip as well. Gratitude, affirmations, trying to dive deeper into where your thoughts and feelings come from. And this also ties into, kind of like mirror neurons, is being really meticulous with your words. A lot of time, not even the words you're saying out loud, the words you're saying internally, but if you're saying things like have to, need to, shoulds, you're creating a lot of constraint on your behaviors. If you say, I have to lose 20 pounds, that's a lot of pressure that you're putting on yourself. And then when you fail to meet that goal of 20 pounds, oh, I'm a piece of poop, right? I can't do anything right. And you're putting so much pressure on yourself. Same thing with work, relationships. You should come from a place of being really meticulous about how you're wording things and using more positive words instead of those negative and really restrictive words. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, those words should not be in our language because there's no truth to them. A lot of times we're very concerned about things that already happened in the past that we have no control over in the present, or we're concerned about what should happen in the future, which again is in the future. It does not actually exist. The only thing that exists is right now. The past and the future are actually completely constructed by our own imagination, and they create a lot of fear and resistance to the present moment. Most people, when you talk to them, 9 times out of 10, they're either worried about something that happened yesterday or even 10 years ago, or they're really concerned about something that might happen in 2 days. And they're not actually living in this current moment. And that creates a lot of suffering in our present because we're so concerned about things that in reality aren't real. Does that make sense? Okay. And change now. This is one of my favorite recommendations because a lot of times we wait till a diagnosis, right? Someone gets diagnosed with cancer or heart disease or diabetes, and then they're like, oh, now I have to make a change. And you feel like this pressure that have to, right? Because now you're coming from a place of suffering in order to make change versus trying to make change during a time of enlightenment, when you feel excited about the possibility of the future change or the goals that you have set for yourself. So not waiting until you get those symptoms, those pains, trying to come from that place of enlightenment first. That's a lot easier to make a change when you're coming from that joy and that inspiration versus that lack, like we talked about, the lack versus abundance, okay? Now, this is one of my favorite quotes. Whatever you fear is in you, not out there. An example of this, I think, is if someone came up to me and said, Dr. Amanda, you are a horrible electrician. Would that offend me? No, because I'm a horrible electrician. I know nothing about electricity. Well, I mean, human electricity I know a little bit about. But, right, it wouldn't offend me because I know it's not true. Versus, say someone came up and it was like, Dr. Amanda, you are just the worst chiropractor or a horrible doctor, right? Whew, that might cut me a little different. But why would that offend me? Well, it's because deep down, maybe I already think that's true. No one, anyone says or does, any circumstance that you experience, nothing can cause you suffering if you don't already believe it to be true. So if someone's attacking you for whatever reason and they're like, oh, you're a horrible mother, but you're like, I'm a great mom, right? It's not going to hurt the same way. And it pertains to every aspect of our life. The things that we fear the most are not outside of ourselves. It's our truth that we find within. So I just absolutely think that when it comes to changing our lives and our goals, if we can just start with understanding this one concept, if you're afraid to lose weight because you have this inherent feeling that you're just not worthy of it, if we don't start with that, even, you've seen those shows like The Biggest Loser, and they lose like 50, 60, 100 pounds, and then what happens within the next couple of years, they gain it all back. It's not a lasting change because they're still coming from that place of fear within themselves, of lack within. And that, if we can touch that, we can change whole communities. And this is just the power of our words and our thoughts and having understanding of how inherently great and abundant every single one of us is in this present moment. Without having, all of us, we don't have to make any goals now. You're like, oh, I'm so glad I came to this talk. I don't have to do anything. I'm just perfect just the way I am. It's not always easy to feel that way, I know. But it is 100% true. And I'm just very glad that I get the privilege to come here and get to talk to you. Like I said, I hope there is one thing that you get to take away from this and helps you make goals moving forward, because it's be the change you want to see in the world, right? The best way you can help the people around you is by practicing this yourself. Being meticulous with your word, coming from awareness of our thoughts, where our behaviors stem from, being aware of what triggers us, and trying not to live from that place of fear. When you do that, you're going to help everyone else in your community as well thrive, okay? So thank you for your attention. I'm going to leave it to Mackenzie and Logan to go through the raffle with you guys, and I will be here in March. We're going to do a class I think it's either on sleep or movement is medicine, so it'll be a really good one, okay? Thank you guys for your attention.